Yo, welcome to the Left Fresh Podcast. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day. Hope everyone's having a great week. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Um, Getting ready to talk sports with you. Welcome to the 9 o'clock sports episode of it. Help you get through the week and get you ready for the weekend. Get you ready for the back end of the week. Thank you all for jumping on again. I want to encourage you to subscribe, like, comment, share, tell a friend to tell a friend. Got a good episode lined up. Um, Got nice into deep into the NBA playoffs. Went to the second round. First half is behind us. Second round's in full swing, and we got some good matchups out of the first round into the second round, and we got some good, like I said, good matchups. Good, see some blowouts, but we also seen some pretty good comebacks and blown leads in the first round. A lot of news around after the first round, a lot of backlash and just different headlines that came from the first round. Very interesting first round of the NBA playoffs. Um, Pretty unpredictable, I like to say. Not too predictable. Some things are still kind of some of these matchups were, some teams are just clearly superior to others, but I mean, it's the first round. I mean, to me, it's about as unpredictable as you can get for a first round. Like I said, we're in a new kind of in that new modern era of parity, and it's starting to show. Um, some matchups didn't go the way people expected it to go, and I think it's good. I think I see the game going in a good direction and everything like that. Seen some pretty good games in the mix. Like I said, we've seen some blowouts and everything, but overall and all in all, it's been a pretty good playoff as far as swings and momentum. 3-1 leads getting blown. Couple game seven series, especially in the East. Three different matchups going to game seven. It's definitely been an interesting run so far. Like I said, I want to encourage all to subscribe, like, comment if you want. Just getting on for the first time. Like I said, share, tell a friend, tell a friend. Thank you all for the support and everything. Like I said, it's the Wednesday episode of the Left Fresh Podcast. Um, Not too much going on in the professional football realm, other than potential rumor of that was pretty much shot down pretty quickly of Aaron Rodgers possibly looking at the Arizona Cardinals. Aaron Rodgers, who's also in the midst of free agency right now, kind of holding off on going back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Pittsburgh's kind of try to see, if Aaron Rodgers is their quarterback or if they got to move on with either Will Howard or rookie quarterback Drew Allar. But yeah, it's pretty interesting as it develops. It may not be anything. Everybody knows, this is a typical off season when you're talking about Aaron Rodgers. So it's like, you know, it's never going to be figured out in May. It may not even be figured out in June. Rodgers is like 42 years old, probably considering a lot of different things. But yeah, when I heard about him possibly going to the Cardinals, I kind of ruled it out myself because um, not that the Cardinals don't have a young upstart offense, but Aaron Rodgers has a way better chance of competing in the AFC North than he does competing in the NFC West. I don't think Aaron Rodgers is actually trying to play against the Seattle Seahawks 2 times a year, the 49ers and the Rams 2 times a year on a Cardinals team that's still, getting up off the ground. It was tough enough playing in Pittsburgh. So the likelihood of him going to Arizona of all places is not likely. So I mean, I've read somewhere that that was just kind of just talk, and I imagine that it would be. But that's pretty much the biggest of NFL news, other than getting ready for training camp and different things. Newly drafted players getting acclimated to their teams and everything. No real big headlines just yet. Looking forward for my Giants, which is I like a couple of our draft picks right now. So, but yeah, it's been a pretty good, interesting year. You go back to the previous lives where I discussed the draft and the outcome and the results and the draft grades and everything. But so far this week, it's been pretty dormant in the NFL. Um, but it's been all about the NBA, and I'm not going to delay any further. Let's get right to it. Looking at the Eastern Conference bracket, you got a pretty interesting Eastern Conference. Like I said, 3 of the 4 series in the East went to 7 games. Um, and we seen 2 3-1 leads get blown, which is crazy in itself. And then of course the Raptors and the Cavaliers went back and forth tooth and nail to game 7. And my Knicks, I mean, I'm not gonna overreact just yet. You know what I mean? As a Knicks fan, you've seen a lot of postseason heartache and a lot of heartbreak and everything like that. So, as a Knicks fan, you're optimistic, but you don't want to get too ahead of yourself. We've seen kind of ugly collapses and everything. I'm actually watching the Knicks right now as I'm live. See that we're up by one, trying to hang on 84-83 in the third quarter with 2 minutes left. Um, Knicks is playing pretty well, but Philadelphia's bouncing back pretty well as well. I know Joel Embiid was a big part of Philadelphia overcoming a 3-1 lead and getting past the Celtics. However, if he's not 100%, then he's kind of hindering the Sixers on the court, especially against the Knicks, who are playing a completely different style these days, which is like refreshing to see. Um, they're probably playing the most impressive basketball of the playoffs at this point. I mean, I have to brag on my Knicks a little bit, but I mean, like I said, I'm not getting too ahead of myself, but at the same time, they are playing some great basketball right now. I think Mike Brown has made the tweak that the New York Knicks front office was waiting for Tom Thibodeau to make, which was stop, get the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands so often. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, yeah, he's a great scoring point guard. Um, he's a good passer, but not a great facilitator. So it leads to a lot of tunnel ball, a lot of tunnel just kind of just leaving him there by him. He's kind of just playing ISO ball most of the time. It's kind of resembles the Derrick Rose style of hero ball offense and everything, and it was kind of just stagnant. And up until this point, Mike Brown came in, and it wasn't that much better results with Mike Brown. It was pretty much stagnant results. I mean, I know for a fact I've been the main one going in as far as what the Knicks should be doing, what the expectations of the Knicks is doing. But he actually put the tweak in effect that's been yielding success up to these last couple of games. I mean, and like I said, it's only really two teams we've played. I know it's just one series and second game right now, and it's a lot closer than these last couple of games have been. So, maybe another tweak may be necessary or something to look into as well. I mean, make adjustments for the adjustments. But I do think it's interesting that Carl Anthony Towns is, handling is actually seeing the floor the way he's seeing it. I mean, he's actually seeing the floor pretty well. I mean, I know him to be a pretty skilled big man, but his passing IQ was actually pretty good. I'm not sure how sustainable it is, but it is unique to see somebody other than Jalen Brunson dominating the ball. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what to me what's been holding up the Knicks is that we teams been acquiring talent, acquiring depth in the offseason and everything like that. It's a pretty talented team that can get out. See OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges doing their thing on the wings and everything, and they're scoring a lot more with the ball out of Jalen Brunson's hands and Cat's hands. Like I said, I don't know if Cat is a long term. I'm not sure if he's joking as far as passing vision and everything, but at the same time, it's just the ball just not being in Jalen Brunson's hand as much kind of unlocks the Knicks as an offense, and Jalen Brunson, kind of rations him a little bit more late in games to close and, score more efficiently and everything like that because it's harder for teams to really just kind of key in on Jalen Brunson now that the ball's not in his hands all the time. It's just really that simple. And the defense is a lot better, has been a lot better as well. This game's a little bit tighter. I mean, Philadelphia's playing a lot better tonight, but of course, they probably a little hungover from Game 7. So I've seen that Game 1 blowout. Like you can't like I said, no rest for the weary. You know what I mean? You can't get too high right now. You know what I mean? Knicks is playing ball very well right now, but you can't. Me as a Knicks fan, living through the history of all the postseason pain and everything like that, I'm not going to get too high. Just going to point out the fact that the Knicks is playing pretty good ball up to this point. Um, Not mad at it. Hope we keep it up. But like I said, you know, I- and then as far as the Hawks go, I'm going to discuss the teams that came up short and everything as well. Um, I don't think the Hawks should have to hold their head too bad, and I understand 50 points, getting beat on your home floor by 50 points in a postseason elimination game is not something to say, "Oh, buck up, you'll be all right." I know it's horrible. It looks bad. It's just bad for the optics, bad for the fan base. But you got to keep in mind the optimism that this is a Hawks team that just traded away their best player and moving on with a young player with really, very little postseason experience. Um, Up 2-1. I know it was a blown 2-1 lead, and I know the last couple of games were awful as far as margin, but you got to go into the offseason with a little optimism. Hawks, Hawks fans, you know what I'm saying? You got cap space, you got young talent in place. You got probably a couple of expendable parts. You know what I mean? I would probably look at whether you want to keep, the combination of Reese Shea, um, Jonathan Kaminga, Nikhil Alexander Walker, Dyson Daniels. Those four kind of are your what do you want to do with those four around Jalen Johnson? I mean, you probably still need a point guard, probably still need a big. And then the other optimistic part is, like I keep saying all season long, the Hawks have the Pelicans pick, which is most likely going to be a lottery pick. Um, how high a pick? Got to wait till the draft lottery. I can't wait till that. To me, that's probably one of the most exciting events leading into the off seasons. This draft lottery. I think this draft lottery is going to determine a lot of different things. So, but yeah, I think the Hawks. Good series to them. I like to talk trash. That we put the beat down on them and everything. Put BTA to them, but looking towards the off season, I think the Hawks are in good shape moving forward. Considering they make the right moves and everything like that, I think they got enough pieces in place and resources and draft capital to where they can keep on building without Trey Young. I think as a GM, you can't get caught up in what's in now and look 3, 4, 5 years ahead. So I mean, I ain't mad at the Hawks for making the move, get rid of Trey Young, and move forward. They got a team that made the playoffs, got hot at the end of the season. Yeah, it ended ugly, but you know, Rome wasn't built in a day. So I'm not going to write them. I'm not going to write them off. I think they got a chance to actually build something in Atlanta. But yeah, and then the Raptors and the Cavaliers. That series turned out to go back and forth. Cavaliers got a lot of expectations on their back right now. They got Donovan Mitchell under trial. The core of Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, and then you add James Harden to the mix, a team that is, a superstar, a Hall of Fame, first ballot Hall of Fame player that is always under scrutiny when it comes to this time of year. The Cavaliers with James Harden, when you put that together, you don't get bigger expectations than that. Most have this team as you better get to the finals, you better get out the East at least type of expectations for the Cavaliers. I mean, a conference finals expectation, even with Detroit, Cavaliers still got big expectations. I mean, I think many eyes were kind of giving the side eye to the Cavaliers, even going to Game 7 with the Raptors. Nothing against the Raptors, but they're another upstart. NBA's a baby step league. I mean, them ending up in the fifth seed is pretty impressive. But I think that given the expectations of the Cavaliers, I didn't think anybody had the Raptors getting past them. And if they somehow did, oh, that Raptors team is definitely under scrutiny. Um, Depending on how this season ends, you're looking at Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, Harden, Mitchell. I mean, are you keeping that core together if they don't make it to the mountaintop? Jared Allen is probably the first expendable I would see because it seems on his way over the cap. They're one of those teams, one of those playoff contending teams that are over the cap. And if they can't get better than this, then they'll probably have to, make some moves, some changes. Donovan's I think up for an extension next season. James Harden is due for a player option I believe it's a team option this season or not. I'm not sure. But I mean, yeah, there's a lot of decisions to be made this after this season. So this window for the Cavaliers is not a very short window, and it's as good a window as it's going to get. Um, make way up to the first, make it up to the first seed. Pistons almost let that one go, man. Yeah, they came back from a 3-1 down. They beat the Magic. Magic surprised everybody because they were a team that many people didn't figure they would get out of the play-in, and they end up beating Charlotte, who turned out not to be for real, or not just ready yet, and they made it to the play, and they made it to the playoffs, and they almost stole this series. And they almost stole this series from them, from the Pistons. So and then they lost it. And ultimately, the next day, shortly after, Coach Jamal Mosley has been let go. So I mean, eh, And then a lot of people, there's people saying, hey, he had a lot of injuries. The Magic dealt with a lot of different things. Jamal Mosley was pretty much gone from before this series started. He was pretty much gone from the end of the season. There's been rumblings all year long that his locker room wasn't really behind him like that, or him in the locker room wasn't all the way there. Particularly Paolo Banchero. A lot of people thought there was dissension between Coach Jamal Mosley, former Coach Jamal Mosley, and star player Paolo Banchero. Um, can't have tension with your star player. You're not getting good results, middling throughout the year. And the one thing that probably could have saved his job, which was winning a playoff series, he blew a 3-1 lead at that. So, I mean, needless to say, you're not pretty much going very long after that. But yeah, the Pistons advanced. Like I said, the Magic. I heard talks of Billy Donovan being a replacement coach for the Magic. He's going to have a lot of tough talk, a lot of tough conversation to have. Whether he can make the tweaks. This is a team that you kind of got everything in place. So a coaching vacancy is actually pretty decent if you can make the right tweaks. Can you get Paolo Banchero, Franz Wagner, who got hurt during the playoff series? Um, Jalen Suggs, Desmond Bain, that core in Orlando, can you get them together? Can you keep them together and healthy and actually make a real run with that team, or do you have to make changes? Um, or any other tweaks. But yeah, Orlando got it up for a second, got it going for a second, and then fell short, and that's ultimately what cost Jamal Mosley, his job after it was pretty much up. It was pretty much decided he was going to lose his job regardless. So yeah, that's the Knicks and the Cavaliers and the Pistons all made it through, and that finally leaves probably not probably the biggest upset of the series, the Boston Celtics, the champions from 2 years ago. You know, great season with Jalen Brown playing without Jason Tatum. Then Jason Tatum makes it back for a playoff run. Goes up 3-1 against the Sixers. And then eventually Joel Embiid comes back and things just take a turn for the worse for the Celtics. I mean, living and dying by the three and mostly dying by the three. And then eventually Jason Tatum just, has another setback or injury, unable to play in game 7, in which, Philadelphia managed to close the deal in Boston. um, Boston still just chucking threes. Joel Embiid kind of lumbers up the floor, cooks the centers. Series over. That's a pretty rough way to end the season, with a lot of expectations because even with Jason Tatum out most of the year, many predicted Boston to come out the East. A lot of people predicted Boston to come out the East. Like I said, many felt like the Pistons were a contender, but not quite ready. You know how the Knicks was looking. You know how my Knicks was looking. I was not expecting them either. Cavaliers, even with the James Harden trade, many were questioning whether Cleveland can actually make a run, especially James Harden's postseason resume. So Boston was a lot of people's safe picks to come out of the East, and they lost in the first round. Um, and here comes the Sixers. The Sixers kind of caught them slipping because this is a team that pretty much all their best players are always hurt, starting with Embiid, and then Paul George, who's kind of in and out of the lineups. And then the only constant you had was Tyrese Maxey and um, great rookie VJ Edgecombe, who's been playing out lights out this rookie season, and who they got with the lottery pick after missing the playoffs last year, with 2 out of the 3 of those stars out. So now they got a VJ Edgecombe was playing well beyond his rookie years, along with Tyrese Maxey. Embiid's out again today, but you know they caught Boston slipping with like 4 guys that was that was already like that Philly team looked like in the first round looked like the Philly team that was assembled to be, and then they came to New York and got beat down, and Embiid's hurt again. So that Sixers team was just good enough to knock off Boston, who you know um, took a lot of threes. Like I said, just living and dying by the three. Everybody's kind of hip to their style. But in other news regarding Boston, um, Shams Charania reported that the NBA has fined Jalen Brown $50,000 for his comments criticizing the officiating during a live stream after Game 7 in the series loss in the first round against the Philadelphia 76ers. Those who don't know, yeah, after the crushing Game 7 loss, Jalen Brown went on a live stream, um, kind of just going back through the game, pulling up footage and just pulling up clips of, egregious calls where he got called for something and other players didn't, or other players did get called for something and he didn't. Just calling out all the discrepancies throughout the series and the game and everything like that. Um, Said a couple other remarks that was pretty, you know, that people would probably took the wrong way. One of which, or not even just the wrong way, or just pointing out and calling out different things. Called out the officiating, and he's also called out Joel Embiid particularly for flopping. He said flopping has ruined our game. Joel Embiid's a great player, one of the best bigs in history, but he flops. He knows it. This isn't new. Um, you know, Jalen had a lot to get off his chest. Needless to say. Um, he's a smart brother, man. He's a very incredibly smart player, very smart person. Um, Understandably, if he points out flaws and discrepancies in officiating, I'm not here to call that. Um, at the same time, I always will say I don't think a lot of people are willing to hear that after a loss. I mean, even if it isn't excuses, even if there are valid claims, it's going to sound like excuses after a loss. It's not going to be taken, respectably, even though, even if it's a valid observation, even if it's a valid claim or criticism, it's not going to be taken well after a loss. Um, Especially to an Embiid. Embiid may flop, but I mean, Embiid's not durable. You know what I mean? Like Embiid lacks so much durability. If he falls, you don't even really question if it's a flop because he's always falling. He's always hurt. He's always legitimately hurt. So, I would say, yeah, flopping is a problem. Has it ruined the game? That's a stretch. But I mean, is flopping annoying? Seeing somebody that's really skilled, really good flopping or drawing fouls and everything like that. Um, you know, I hate to be the one to say this too, but there's footage of Jalen Brown flopping too or trying to draw calls. You know what I mean? Like Jalen Brown is there's actual footage of Jalen Brown out here flopping too. You know what I mean? Everybody's kind of selling calls. So I mean, one thing is ruining the game is just kind of just the social media crime, man. Like honestly, like I said, even if this stuff is valid, my advice is don't leave it to the refs. Stop settling for threes. Get to the lane, draw contact. Like I said, I mean, I've seen regular season games of Jalen Brown. You got ejected from the Spurs game. That was egregiously acting as well. And I get it. You know what I mean? Jalen Brown kind of feels like everybody's pointed out on him. Everybody says he's stiff arming or doing the quote unquote Mark Henry. I think he meant Derrick Henry stiff arm. But extending the arm and everything like that. Yeah, listen, everybody's kind of it's very ambiguous with the extension of the arm and everything when players are driving and all that. I mean, at the end of the day, like I don't think that had anything to do with the amount of threes that Boston took. How Embiid got to the lane, drew contact, you know, cooking Vucevic and Kata, the other centers that Boston had, the other big men. I don't think that had anything to do with it, man. Honestly, I think he's just really speaking from a lot of frustration. Like I said, he's kind of criticized the officiating all year. He's been fined before because of it. Um, yeah, man. I mean, yeah, it was good. Everybody's extending their arm now. It's part of everybody's bag. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's what I'm saying. That's the ambiguous part about it. He's definitely speaking out of frustration and everything because, like I said, you probably shouldn't go live after a loss in a game 7. You know what I'm saying? Probably the last thing you want to do is go live. You're going to vent and put your frustrations out and everything. I watched a couple of his lives and everything. Um, he kind of, some people. I feel like people who kind of just get on here, kind of therapeutic. It's kind of therapeutic for some to speak on everything. So he's okay to voice his complaints, but I mean the NBA is going to be able to respond the same way. He's been fine before, and since he's spoken on it before, yes, it feel like he has to continue speaking on it. Yeah, he has to be that guy. So, yeah, yeah, and it's like that's what I mean. It's like that's one part of it. Like he complained about the officiating on his part, Joel Embiid with the flopping and everything. And like I said, I always live by the expression, don't leave it up to the refs. You know what I mean? Like we can kind of do this every game. Almost every game has egregious calls or officiating, but when you take a bunch of threes per game and you don't attack the basket, you don't attack the paint, you kind of do that to yourself. You're your own demise. Especially when you say Embiid is flopping and everything. Embiid can't really do much anything else but fall over and everything. He's playing through appendectomy. He's had other injuries now. He's out right now. Okay, nobody wants to hear about Embiid flopping. I mean, honestly, we know Embiid flops, but Embiid is so injury prone at this point in his career that he should not be cooking the Boston Celtics the way he did. That we're not trying to hear that flopping stuff. Not after no blown 3-1 lead. No, sir. We're not trying to hear that. Not at this point. Nice try. But this also was also on his live stream. This quote that this was his favorite year of his basketball career. And you kind of wonder, like, it is more to it than just how the season ended. Like you said, he enjoyed this season very much, very much. Jason Tatum came back towards the end of it, and I think he kind of felt like he felt like he was leading the team. He was doing everything just fine. He got a taste of that leadership role, and you know things kind of got clunky a little bit towards the end. And I think he's kind of, and I'm not saying he doesn't any type of resentment towards Jason Tatum. They made a great combination of wings for the past throughout their whole career. You think back to their rookie year. I mean, Jason Tatum's rookie year and Jalen Brown's, second or third year. They went to the finals. I mean, the conference finals with Kyrie, who got hurt, and they took LeBron to 7 games. People forget about those younger years of them. And so they played a lot of years. They played their whole entire careers together. And they had a great run. They maximized it by winning the ring. They're both two of the highest paid players in the NBA. And Jason Tatum, unfortunately, going down last year, kind of put Jalen Brown in a position to have the keys to the team for the whole season. And, him venting about, as far as how the series played out and how everything played out, I think speaks to a little bit more to the story. And I was caught a quote that's been going around, or, a statement from T Mac, Tracy McGrady, who's everybody who kind of puts as a close mentor to Jalen Brown. He was on his podcast with Vincent T Mac, the Cousins podcast, and he said that he thinks Jalen Brown's frustration lies deeply within the organization, and that we don't have the details to. There's just a lot of stuff that I've been hearing just going on with the Boston organization with JB. And like I said, I can't verify it. I don't know details, anything like that. I don't call hearing any type of unhappiness with Jalen Brown in Boston. I mean, like I said, he's him and Jason Tatum got broke off as far as financially, but I'm not sure what other issues may be underlying. Um, Not saying McGrady's wrong or right, not saying how valid this is, but you know he got a better insight than I would. So I mean, all I can say is just bring up the hypotheticals and the possibilities of such being true. And you know, Jalen Brown, you know, is on a, like I said, him and Jason Tatum together. Uh, you wonder if it possibly has ran its course, especially after winning a ring, because, you know, if you look at that Boston roster right now, the way it's constructed, Jalen Brown, Jason Tatum, Derek White, you got Peyton Pritchard, you got a expiring contract on Vucevic. I mean, there's really not much depth left in Boston after trading off Porzingis and Drew Holiday and moving off the other parts and everything. Boston, that cap hit from those tax aprons with those two salaries right there, that's a lot. Um, and the question is, after you win a ring in today's NBA, is how do you get better? How do you retool? How do you get back? Because this is a team that won a title 2 years ago, and they are first round exit. And there's really a question of how do they get better? And as his mentor, why is he running his mouth? Well, I mean, I think everybody's kind of wondering like what's going on with Jalen Brown. People are wondering that for the last couple of months, actually. You know what I mean? This is a guy who many said should have been an MVP candidate. Many kind of had skeptics about it. Um, Many people wonder why there's so much skepticism about him. And You know, does he and there's people that question whether how likable is he. I guess T Mac speaking out as a mentor is basically trying to support him by saying, it's an organizational thing. But now that's probably another. Now that's probably if there's smoke, there's fire type of thing in Boston with Jalen Brown, which you know, take it back to the bracket real quick. You look at Boston. You look at Boston. They're a team that won a title like 2 years ago. Big contracts on the books. Like I said, Jason Tatum, Jalen Brown. How do you get better and retool to come back when you got your two highest paid players there and really no real cap space? Got a little bit of room, but what type of tweaks can you make in Boston that's going to help them get back into the fold with the teams like the rest of the teams in the East? Because getting sent home by Philadelphia pretty much says you got two guys that can keep you in the playoffs for years to come. Tatum and Brown, but how can you get back over the hump now that you won a title? And this is kind of a microcosm of the big picture here as far as today's NBA, as far as tax restrictions and tax aprons and everything like that. Teams that have won titles, how do you get back to being a title contender? Because your team's gonna be too expensive to keep. Um, and really the only solution kind of is if you have to draft well. You got to hit on draft picks. You got to get players that are talented and inexpensive. Otherwise, like trading Jalen Brown is probably going to put you in a situation where you still got a lateral move. I've heard discussions since these, unhappiness rumblings have come out. I've heard discussions of Jalen Brown possibly being traded. And I'm like, well, where would you trade him to? Of course, the first thing everybody comes up with is Milwaukee. How to bring Giannis to Milwaukee. And they could just package up Jalen Brown. But Giannis's contract is pretty much the same as Jalen Brown. So, there's no real collateral for either side here. It would just kind of almost be like a swap because of the salary, because of the team salaries. And Giannis and Tatum are interesting, but Giannis is getting up there in age as well. And you still end up with just two stars on a top heavy roster. And you're wondering, is that really going to help them get over the hump in Boston even? I mean, that's kind of the thing with the Giannis trade in limbo is that what team can he really go to that's really going to make him a contender and not just a lateral move? It just being another city in the same spot, just in the playoffs, possibly a first or second round exit. So I mean, yeah, that's definitely an interesting dynamic. But and then there's also, Jalen Brown is from the Georgia area, Marietta product. I think Atlanta, when it comes to its stars like Anthony Edwards and Jalen Brown, I think Atlanta is always kind of in the mix for, trying to get those stars to come back to the city. Like I said, Atlanta Hawks is rebuilding, young team, bunch of cap room, cap space. I mean, they can keep going, building through the draft and see what type of depth they can stack up, or they can make a run and try to trade in some of those pieces to bring in a legit star. Another star with Jalen Johnson. Jalen Johnson, the difference is with Jalen Johnson and a regular star is that he's under a rookie. I mean, he's not under a super max contract. So, the Atlanta Hawks can actually take on a star and actually have some pieces around him to work with. So that'll be interesting as well. I mean, I don't know if the Hawks is actually would make that type of move, but if you're just looking at destinations out the ordinary, since this unhappiness talk is in the air, we might as well get the trade talk in the air a little bit too. So yeah, um, Jalen Brown, could be more to the story. Definitely going to be more unleashed as it comes out. I definitely feel like there is smoke, there is fire. Matter is who's going to put out the fires. There's going to be a trade happening. Something's going to happen in the off season. I know that for a fact. I feel like somebody's getting moved. Somebody of star level is getting moved in the off season. The trade deadline started getting crazy. This year, just the trade deadline. You see players, you see stars getting moved. Anthony Davis and Trey Young getting moved. Somebody's going to get moved to make cap space, especially when you got teams that are over the cap, not getting to the finals, not getting out of the first round, not even winning a playoff series. Yeah, it's typically when you're over the cap and not achieving, yeah, heads is going to roll. Um, let's go ahead and switch over now to the Western Conference. Yeah, Western Conference was jumping. Um, well, not as much jump as the East, shall I say. Western Conference was a lot more cut and dry than the East. Um, Suns, it was good to see the Suns make the playoffs. You traded away Kevin Durant from a Suns team that didn't even make the playoffs last year, and you get Dylan Brooks and Jalen Green, two parts that Houston was just willing to part ways with to get Kevin Durant, and you make the playoffs with them. Um, Pretty impressed with Phoenix for that. Um, but being impressed only gets you so far. OKC is a machine, and the machine just broke out the brooms, swept them up out of there real quick. They had an impressive showing in the play-in. Suns did, but at the end, it wasn't enough to get past, not even get a game on the Thunder. But it was a good season. Dylan Brooks had a great season as on the offensive side of things, as well as his defensive side. He had a pretty good two-way player season. Jalen Green, consistency is always something to ask more of, but in his highs, he looked pretty good this season. Um, Devin Booker, a lot of questions that was going around about what's Devin Booker going to do in Phoenix? How we going to get Devin Booker out of Phoenix? Phoenix owner uh, Ishbak said, "No, it's not happening. Devin Booker is a son. We love the son. We love him in Phoenix, and he's our guy." Devin Booker, I've heard pretty much loves Phoenix the same too. I know everybody wanted to get him in Detroit when Detroit was down 3-1. Cade needs another score. Get Devin Booker. Devin Booker's not leaving. Um, Phoenix is going to continue to try to build around him. And honestly, I think Phoenix has finally got the idea that you know that big three concept is pretty much dead in today's NBA. You got to get some depth. Hopefully they can go into the draft and get another young talent, and the young talent that they do have around Devin Booker continues to develop. You got Jalen Green, you still got Dylan Brooks. That kind of three guard system. I feel like Devin Booker is best as a shooting guard. I feel like the Suns actually need a real point guard though. I mean, that's fine. You want to build around Devin Booker and everything, but get him some parts that finally fit. Him having him play out of position at point guard. That's you know, I get it. A lot of shooting guards kind of a lot of combo guards these days, and Devin Booker could kind of play as both, but it would be good to get like an actual point guard that can actually free him up and actually can free Booker up at the off guard spot again. But you know, Devin Booker's a solid player, star player, and everything like that. I mean, I imagine the Suns will want to keep building around him and get a contender. However, I also feel like there's going to be a point when the Suns are going to probably want to move on from Devin Booker, as opposed to Devin Booker wanting to get out. I mean, at some point, you know, not going to, he's not going to, he's headed towards the back end of his prime, and his contract is pretty heavy. Same thing as the Giannis situation. Some of these small market teams want to hold on to their stars forever and want them to retire as part of them, which is great and everything for sentimental value. You can build a statue for them and everything, but actually getting better when probably the best thing you could do is probably move on from your star player to get better. That's always kind of the interesting dynamic at play. But yeah, pretty much cut and dry in that 1 versus 8 seed. Thunder got past them, rolled pretty quickly. The Lakers defied the odds. Maybe the odds got a little easier, maybe, but the Lakers still pretty much defied the odds as far as when they had Luca and Austin Reeves and LeBron. It was pretty much a given that hey, if they play the Rockets, that's the team they will want to play if they want to win a playoff series. And then Luca got hurt, and then Austin Reeves got hurt, and it was just LeBron. And then Kevin Durant got hurt, and all of a sudden the Lakers went up 3-0. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, man, LeBron's still doing this at 41 years old. Yeah, that's crazy. And then, it looked like the Rockets was gonna do something, but it looked like it was just more or less a fight for morale. At the end of the day, the Rockets came up short. Um, Lakers had an impressive series. Um, First game against the Thunder was actually a pretty impressive game considering they didn't have Luca. Um, Considering when they did have Luca and Luca got hurt on April 2nd in that matchup against OKC, OKC was beating the brakes off of them. So it is pretty impressive to see them, in the playoff setting, putting up a decent fight. I mean, only getting blown out by just double digits and not getting beat up by 20, 30, 40 points. Um, it's pretty impressive considering no Luca. LeBron had a great night too against the Thunder. 27 points, 6 assists. Shot pretty well too. You know, but we already know what OKC is doing. They're like, hey, we can live with LeBron being LeBron as long as we shut down as long as we shut down Austin Reeves and Marcus Smart and Luke Kennards, which is a pretty much an easy task. Um, they asked LeBron was missing on their offense, and LeBron comically answered, this is guy that averaged like 37 points a game, 33 points to be exact. But yeah, you're missing Luca. You're not beating, you're pretty much not beating the Thunder without Luca. Um, and if you don't, then that's kind of where these GOAT discussions come in at him. If he did somehow make it past them, but that's probably not going to happen in this series. I mean, it's probably the least serious team left in the playoffs is probably in the West is probably the Lakers. Um, Moving on to the next one, the upset of the West was the Timberwolves beating the Nuggets, and that's another sidebar there that I'm not too surprised about the Timberwolves beating the Nuggets because how they match up with them. Um, I am surprised at how well Rudy Gobert played Jokic. I know people are still saying Joker still had a great series. Well, Joker's still a great player, but Rudy Gobert had a great series against him defensively. At least just making him work for it, making him uncomfortable, making him work. Throwing off some of those angles that Joker's used to work in and everything. And you look at these stats, right? You're like 25 points, 25.8 points, 13 rebounds, 9 assists. That doesn't look like a player that got clamped up or shut down or anything like that. But Joker shot under 45% and shot like 16% from three, which people know efficiency is the thing that comes with Joker's numbers. So, it's not just, oh, yeah, he put up a bunch of points and assists and rebounds. Joker does all of that stuff efficiently. Joker is the all time leader in player efficiency rating um, in PER. VORP and all that type of stuff. Joker just shatters advanced analytics. So for him to not be analytically dominant is kind of a surprise. I mean, the numbers are going to be there. Somebody got to put up the numbers. Jokic is going to put up the numbers. He's still Jokic, but the rest of the Nuggets, as well as Jokic shot awfully that series compared to his standards. Jamal Murray shot awfully in that series. Jaden McDaniels and the rest of the Timberwolves, with really no Ant Man either. Throughout most of the series, no Ant Man, and that Minnesota defense was tough, scrappy, physical. They were athletic. Um, Denver just looked uncomfortable offensively all through the series. Aaron Gordon, I think he's at a point now where it's like, it's a struggle for him to stay healthy. Jamal Murray's getting up there in a little bit of age. The parts that they moved, the tweaks that they made to get the Nuggets back into contention form. Cameron Johnson's, the Bruce Browns, the Christian Browns. Those players are good, but not enough to get them over the hump. Like, a couple years ago, this is another team, and this is interesting. I'll bring up the Celtics and the Nuggets, that two teams that won titles 2-3 years ago are now first round exits. And one of the things, another casualty of the tax aprons, which is kind of the design of the NBA, is you know, you can put together a team to win that first ring, but that second ring and the third ring and everything is going to get harder and harder to win those rings because of um, financial the financial implications. You know, last year, before the start of the season, Denver Nuggets made a trade. They traded Michael Porter Jr. to the Brooklyn Nets and for Cameron Johnson, and that was to alleviate cap room to get them under the tax aprons. Now you kind of you're still over the tax apron, you're still, over the cap, you still don't have any way of getting better without getting rid of some of those contracts. So now, just like with the Celtics, the Nuggets are now looking at, all right, who else is expendable? And you got to start looking at maybe even Jamal Murray or Aaron Gordon, those part of that. You got to chip away more at that core that's gotten more expensive. And now at that point, how do you rebuild? Well, you gotta get back in the draft. You gotta hit on draft picks. Um, same thing with the Celtics. Like I said, you got key players under big contracts. Um, other teams have gotten better around you. They built through the draft. Looking at this Spurs team in the next matchup, I mean, this is a team just like OKC. Both of these teams are built through the draft. They got most of their young talent on rookie contracts, which means they're not going away or trying to get cheaper or make any real tweaks. They just letting their team, they're just letting it mesh. They're just letting it mesh and they're letting it cook. You know what I mean? Um, Extensions going to be given out. Some of those won't hit for another year or so as far as the hit. And like I said, the Thunder kind of figured out the formula for now. If you look at the Thunder, Chet got an extension. I think Jalen Williams got an extension. SGA got an extension. You know, same thing with the Thunder. They gotta hit. They gotta win again in this window. If they're gonna win again, if they're gonna repeat, they got to do it in this window because that team gets expensive really fast, and you may have to trim the hedges and cut off some of those expensive salaries, especially a team that builds through the draft. That's kind of how you keep it going. Is that if you're nailing your first round picks and they're becoming great players, then you got them for a lesser salary, and anybody that's expensive and expendable, you gotta ship them out to a team that got cap space. You look at the impressive playoff series win by the San Antonio Spurs. Victor Wembanyama overcame a concussion, missed like game two. Um, didn't really stop the Spurs too much from running through the Trailblazers. Trailblazers had a good run. Dini Avdija had a great run, All-Star season. Scoot Henderson looked like he was making strides and improvements. Donovan Clingan, those are three young players right there that they got in place and around the veterans like Drew Holiday. And you got Damian Lillard coming back to that team next year. You got Jeremy Grant. So Portland got some tweaks to make as well, but then I think they're in good shape as well to get better. Young team is going to be back in the mix. I see them being another playoff team in the West again next year. I expect them, like I said, to be in there with the San Antonios, the Thunder, the Rockets. All the young teams are just taking their baby steps as they go. Um, Timberwolves and the Spurs was a good game one. Anthony Edwards came back from a hyperextended knee injury and put up 18 points, good shots and everything. Victor Wembanyama had a tough offensive night scoring wise, but had a triple double, had 12 blocks. One thing about I think Minnesota, they're gonna play that physical, athletic bully ball, and I think that's games. I think those games are gonna kind of cost them throughout this series a little bit because I think Victor is too great defensively to try to just bully on him. I mean, it's a matter of his shots going down. I mean, you beat him by 2 points, even with that style of ball. So I don't know if that playing that strategy against San Antonio is really sustainable for the whole series. But I think Victor's gonna have a bounce back game. And hopefully, Anthony Edwards stays healthy throughout the series and doesn't re-aggravate anything, trying to come back too soon. That's kind of my biggest concern. This Minnesota team is a sleeper team going into the playoffs. I mean, they're a lower seed team, so I don't think anybody really saw like a high potential for them. But you got to think about it; they've been to two straight conference finals. They're probably one of the most experienced teams in the playoffs outside of the Thunder and the Lakers. And really, the Lakers' experience really just kind of stretches with LeBron and Luca and all them. Yeah, but yeah, Thunder, Lakers, yeah, and the Nuggets, of course. Yeah, the Timberwolves are one of the most experienced teams in the playoffs as far as making deep runs 2 straight years. So, you know, I'm not going to write them off as not getting past the Spurs. Um, if anybody could probably beat the Spurs at this, I think the Spurs can go down any round at this point just because of, just the lack of experience. But I'm not counting out Wemby either because I've never seen Wemby before, and how he bounces back, what type of energy he takes out. This can go either way. Still, I think this is an interesting series. I mean, like I said, the experience easily goes to the Timberwolves, but Spurs could be a machine in the making. Who knows when they can jump that course? Um, be interesting to see in the West. It's pretty much cut and dry. Everybody kind of watching the best two teams in the West all season long: Spurs and the Thunder. Um, I don't think you can go wrong with either series, though. If the Timberwolves get past the Spurs, and then you see round two of the Thunder versus Timberwolves in the conference finals, I'd love to see that as well. A part two of that. Ant-Man versus SGA. Even though I would like to see Ant-Man at 100%, but yeah, yeah, I would definitely love to see that series though. Either one of those series work out. Thunder against either one of them. But yeah, it's been pretty much cut and dry in the West once the dust settled. Other than the Nuggets, getting knocked off early, who a lot of teams predicted. A lot of people predicted to make it out the West. Other than that, really no real surprises in the West so far. Um, I'm definitely interested in seeing how it all plays out with the Nuggets situation. Like I said, the Nuggets and the Celtics, you know, teams that win titles usually usually going through a tough time. Like, let's just go at the start of the decade. Let's go to the Lakers in the pandemic. You know, ever since then, ever since LeBron and AD won in the bubble, it's been kind of a struggle to, they kept them together up until it's time to trade Luca, but they couldn't find a way to get better around them to make another run. Because with the tax aprons and the new CBA over the last couple years, um, well, it used to be hard to have three superstar players on one team. It became harder to even have two superstar players on one team. And honestly, it's gonna get harder to, yeah, even, get more than one super max salary player on the team and just kind of just put as much depth around them as possible because you put two max salaries together. I mean, that you're not gonna have much room for much depth. At the end of the day, no matter how great two players are, they're still just two players. Um, like I said, the Lakers have struggled to get back to the finals ever since the pair against the bubble. You see the Milwaukee Bucks; they're not even in the playoffs anymore. They're not even a playoff team since Giannis brought them a title. You look at the Golden State Warriors. Um, look at the Golden State Warriors. You know, they haven't been a real contender since Steph got them that last title. And then, of course, you see the Thunder, then you see the Nuggets, and you see the Celtics. So winning that first title, after that first title, you're pretty much stuck. And you're pretty much stuck in a middle of the pack type of thing because where you're still either a fringe playoff contender or you're not a playoff contender, but you're kind of stuck. Like, how do you get better? And to me, the only real answer is like OKC is showing is just hitting on draft picks. Like OKC got draft picks coming to them this year, this off season. So they can repeat and still have potential, couple first round picks, a couple of first round picks. And as well as OKC drafts, if they hit on more picks, they're not going anywhere. They'll still be sustainable for a while. Even if they have to cut losses from star players on the big salaries, they got draft picks that they hit on that can just keep developing and growing. So it's like you got to draft well in today's game. Signing stars is not going to do you well. It's going to put you over the cap. Look what Golden State did, trying to making that play for Jimmy Butler. Now Golden State's not even in the playoffs. So, winning after you win that first ring, you automatically almost find yourself in the middle of the pack. And everybody knows in the NBA the worst place to be is middle of the pack on any sport. You either want to be the worst team to where you can be in line for a high pick to hit on a draft pick, or you want to be, fighting for a championship. That middle of the pack is either a first round exit year in and year out, like Boston and all the other previous champions of this decade. And now I think the only way to dig themselves out for a lot of these teams that won titles, you got to hit on a draft pick. You got to hit a draft pick, which leads to my final topic. 2 weeks ago, actually, there was more discussion about the anti-tank rules, and I only want to talk about it now as we get closer to the draft lottery. That's in May. The NBA has announced a new draft 3-2-1 proposal to avoid tanking. Proposal being, something that's in discussion but not quite, signed off on. No changes being made just yet. And I'm glad. And I feel like we should let the draft lottery that we already have in place play out. And before we're outraged enough to change a whole structure, just to reverse tanking for a particular year where there's like a generationally good draft class. If there's a weak draft class, there's not going to be much tanking after that. So let's not overreact. But a couple of points that the 3-2-1 proposal was 16 teams in a lottery with flattened odds. Everybody has the same odds. Relegation zone for bottom three teams. Fewer lottery balls for a number one pick. Relegation zone for bottom three teams, meaning like, almost kind of like reducing them to um reducing reducing to almost like a G League sounds like. But teams 4 through 10 in the lottery get 3 balls each. Relegation area 1 through 3 get 2 balls, but cannot fall past the 12th pick. Okay, so that's what the relegation zone, sounds like. It basically is number of basically number of straws in the hat but can't fall past the 12th pick. The ninth and 10th playing seeds get two lottery balls. Losers of seventh and eighth games get one ball. No team will be able to win the top pick in back-to-back years. See, this is one I got a problem with right there. No team not being able to win the top pick in back-to-back years. Teams cannot win a top five pick in 3 straight years. Teams can no longer protect picks in the 12th and 15th slots. Um, I don't think this is really necessary. Like I said, I don't think draft classes are going to be this good to require this every single year. I think the draft lottery that's already in place. I know people say, "Oh, draft lottery is rigged." The draft lottery works just the way it works, and it works just fine because just when you think a team is going to be rewarded for tanking, they're not. They're not. Um, just because you see a star player going to a team that traded away a star player in the lottery, a la New Orleans Pelicans getting Zion after trading Anthony Davis, and Dallas getting Cooper Flag after trading Luca. People don't like the idea of just a coincidence. It's got to be a conspiracy. I get it, but if it went to the team that tanked, you would also be mad as well. I don't mind a little shakeup. I can live with a shakeup. Okay, a little shakeup in the structure never messed on anything. I would like to see teams that never won a draft lottery win a draft lottery, if anything. But my opposition to all of this is that can we really say all of these suggestions are really going to help the worst teams get better? I mean, not every bad team is tanking. What if a team is just bad, like really bad? And these type of situations here really are going to reward teams that are like almost middle of the pack, which isn't bad either. But how does a bad team get better with all of this? Or I mean, you gotta be, you can't be reactionary when it comes to this. You can't just react to the criticisms and the complaints about tanking and rigged and gambling and everybody, all the pissed off gamblers, and make a drastic move that really is kind of counterproductive to the whole cause of parity, which was what everyone was looking for in the first place. And with today's CBA and tax aprons, this is another situation that fixes itself because look how many star players got sent off to bad teams that just for salary dumps. Teams kind of getting better just off of salary dumps. I mean, look at the Wizards. I'm not saying the Wizards are going to get better with Trey Young and Anthony Davis, but look what Jaron Jackson Jr. ended up in Utah. I know Utah got fined for tanking, but you know they just ended up with a former Defensive Player of the Year um, on a team that's already rebuilding and taking baby steps to turn the corner. Overall, I think we all know the NBA is a baby step league. Teams are going to be bad for a couple years before they be good, and idea that a team can't win a top pick in back to back years. What if they're bad 2 years in a row? What if they get a really good player and the team and it's still bad? Cooper Flag, in Dallas, that roster was blown up around and was depleted. Why is it far fetched that they can get a number one pick again, or a team getting a top five pick in 3 straight years? I mean, that OKC dynasty, the first one with, I mean, not dynasty, they didn't actually win, but Kevin Durant, 3 MVPs drafted one. Kevin Durant, Westbrook, Harden, three MVPs, future MVPs drafted 3 years in a row. You know, we can't fault teams that actually went through the course and really were bad. You know what I mean? So doing this as a universal form to discourage tanking seems just reactionary, over the top. And I think once the draft lottery happens in May, and once it all shakes out, and you see the teams, where they're at, hopefully a team that wasn't notorious for tanking doesn't get the number one pick, though that can hopefully reduce the outcry and kind of just prolong it and just leave it the way it is for a second. I mean, until you come up with a real live plan to reduce tanking. Other than that, a fine, to me, a fine and maybe a lost draft pick in egregious cases, that works fine enough for me. But I mean, the idea is helping teams get better, helping bad teams get better. Um, you got these tax aprons that break up teams from becoming dynasties. Let's not shake the ship too much more than it's already been shaken up. So, I mean, that's just my personal opinion on it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this draft just because of all this uproar about tanking and seeing where the teams line up to get a very deep draft class full of players as well. I've been ranting and raving about it for a while. So this is the month for it, and can't wait for the next upcoming weeks to hear about the draft lottery. But yeah, that's my time, everyone. Y'all have a great night. Have a great hump day. Look forward to talking to you all on Saturday for the hip hop episode, the Saturday Night Live episode at 10 o'clock. I'll get back at you all with the postings for that. Um, Getting back to the playoffs. Game still in full swing. Second round is picking up. Like I said, I'll be back next week for the sports, more sports coverage, more sports discussions, all type of different things like that. I appreciate you all for tuning in. Like I said, I want to encourage you all to like, subscribe, comment, share, tell a friend, tell a friend. You can find me on Instagram at This Is Left Fresh. You can find me on TikTok at This Is Left Fresh as well. Hope you all have a great night. See you all on Saturday. This is the Left Fresh podcast. We out.